My name's Eli. I'm 33, and up until this year, I thought my family was fine. Not perfect. What family is? But decent enough that I never questioned where I stood with them. We weren't the type to say, I love you, every time we hung up the phone, but we celebrated birthdays, showed up for holidays, and made small talk about the weather or whatever Netflix show everyone was pretending to like. I always figured that was normal. That was family. It wasn't until my dad's retirement party that I realized I'd been living in a kind of quiet illusion, one that would shatter in a single evening under the soft buzz of string lights and the hum of polite laughter. Dad retired after 37 years as a mechanical engineer, the kind of old-school man who still keeps his tools oiled and arranged alphabetically. He deserved a proper send-off, and my mom, meticulous as ever, planned a backyard party that could have doubled as a wedding reception. She booked a caterer, rented those white tents that sway in the wind, and even got one of those fancy gold balloon arches that spelled, "Congrats, Dad." It was the kind of event where everyone wore smiles like uniforms, tight, polite, coordinated. My sister, Julia, handled the decorations and made sure everyone knew it. My brother, Mark, organized the entertainment, which mostly meant giving himself an excuse to hog the mic later. Me? I designed the slideshow. Hours of scanning old photos, fixing the faded edges, and syncing them to Dad's favorite songs. No one asked me to, but it felt like something meaningful I could do for him. For the most part, the evening went smoothly. People ate, laughed, reminisced. Dad looked genuinely happy, a little overwhelmed even, which made me feel proud. But then came the speeches. Mom went first, gracious, composed, like always. She thanked everyone for coming, praised Dad for his hard work, and made a few jokes about how she was finally getting her handyman back full-time. Everyone laughed. It was sweet. Then Julia, ever the performer, got up and took the mic. She started by tearing up, of course she did, and everyone cooed at her sincerity. "Dad, you've always been my role model," she said, voice trembling perfectly. "You taught me how to stay strong, how to never give up. And Mom," she turned dramatically toward her, "you've been the heart of this family. You've kept us together, always." She smiled around the table, her eyes sweeping the guests. "And to my amazing brother Mark, who's always stepped up to lead, to make decisions, to protect us. You're incredible. You really are the backbone of this family." The crowd clapped. I clapped too, waiting, just waiting, for my name to follow. But it didn't. She went on, thanking cousins, aunts, even her best friend from high school who's basically family. My name never came up. Not once. I laughed under my breath, at first thinking it had to be an oversight. I mean, who forgets their own brother in a family speech? But then I saw Mom nodding proudly, her hands clasped together, eyes shining. Mark smirked. It hit me then. This wasn't an accident. I tried to brush it off, really. Maybe I was overreacting. But the air around me felt heavy, sticky, like everyone else could feel the omission too, but decided it wasn't their place to say anything. Then Mark took the mic. He grinned that grin he always used to wear when he'd just scored a point off me as a kid. "You know," he said, adjusting his tie like he was about to deliver a TED Talk, "some of us were just born to lead. Others, well, others just follow." The laughter came quick, easy, thoughtless. Even Dad chuckled. I smiled. I clapped. I even laughed a little, though I felt something sharp twist in my chest. Because that's what you do, right? You don't make a scene. You don't spoil your dad's big night. After the speeches, I helped gather plates and cups, taking refuge in small tasks. I stacked chairs, packed leftovers, even helped Julia load decorations into her car. She didn't look at me once. Neither did Mark. Mom kissed me on the cheek when I said goodbye, like everything was perfectly normal. That night, when I got home, I sat on the couch and stared at nothing for a long time. It wasn't just the speeches, it was what they revealed. The truth I'd been too polite or too blind to notice all these years. I wasn't really part of their picture. I was background. Reliable, quiet, forgettable. Still, I didn't confront them. Not right away. Instead, I replayed the night in my head over and over, trying to convince myself that I was imagining it. But then came the group photo Julia posted online the next morning, celebrating the real pillars of our family. Her caption read, there it was again. The same phrase, the same exclusion. Dad, Mom, Julia, and Mark were tagged. My name wasn't. That's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. More like a calm, deliberate focus. I realized I didn't want to shout or argue or demand recognition. I wanted them to see what they'd done, to feel that sting of invisibility I'd lived with quietly for years. So I started thinking, planning. I didn't have a timeline or even a clear idea yet. But I knew one thing for certain. When I finally decided what to do, it wasn't going to be impulsive. It was going to be quiet, careful, something they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. It took 4 days. 4 days of small talk texts from Mom about leftover cake. 4 days of Mark posting smug photos with captions like family over everything. 4 days of Julia sending out thank you emails with little lines like, couldn't have done it without my amazing support system. On the 4th day, I opened my laptop, typed a letter, and attached a single file. When I hit send, I didn't expect much, just a ripple, maybe. But what happened after that? Well, let's just say, none of them ever looked at me the same again. And the best part? The thing I attached wasn't cruel or dramatic. It was something far simpler, something that forced them, for once, to see exactly who they'd been ignoring all along. But before I get to that part, I should probably explain how things got this bad in the first place. Because if you'd told me a year ago that my own family would laugh at me in front of 50 people and then pretend it never happened, I would have said you were crazy. The truth is, this didn't start at the retirement party. It started long before that, years ago, when I learned what it meant to be the quiet one. Even as kids, the roles were set in stone. Julia was the golden child, loud, confident, always performing. Mark was the leader, the man of the house in training. Me? I was the helper, the one who made things work behind the scenes. I fixed their computers, did the dishes when Mom forgot, stayed home to watch the dog when everyone else went on weekend trips. No one told me to. I just did it. Because that's what you do when you love your family. You support them. But somewhere along the way, that love started looking a lot like servitude. There was one Christmas when Julia got into a fight with Mom about her boyfriend not being invited. She stormed out mid-dinner. Guess who drove an hour in the snow to pick her up and bring her back? Me. And when Mark crashed his car senior year, guess who helped him pay for repairs because he didn't want to tell Dad? Me again. You'd think that kind of loyalty would count for something, right? But in my family, it just became the expectation. Eli will fix it. Eli will help. Eli won't make a fuss. So by the time Dad's party came around, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. I'd trained them to forget me. Still, hearing it out loud, seeing it play out in real time, did something to me. It woke something up. And that's why, for days later, I sent the letter. But before I explain what was in it, I need to tell you about the week that followed the party. Because that's when the mask really started to slip, when small cracks started showing in the perfect family facade. And those cracks, they were all I needed. The week after the retirement party felt like a hangover, not from alcohol, but from humiliation. The kind that lingers behind every polite smile, every "how are you?" text that pretends nothing happened. My phone buzzed with the usual family chatter, photos of leftover cake, group messages about returning rented chairs, even a chain of memes from Mark that all somehow circled back to leadership jokes. At first, I tried to respond like normal. Short replies, thumbs up emojis, a little haha, when Mark sent something funny. But every word I typed felt heavier than it should have. The laughter in that tent, the look on Mom's face when Julia skipped over me, it played on loop in my head like a bad song. Then, on the 5th day, I went to drop off a box of tools Dad had lent me. It should have been a 10-minute visit. Instead, it became the moment I realized how deep the favoritism ran. When I pulled into the driveway, Mark's car was already there. He and Julia were standing by the garage, laughing with Dad. They all stopped when they saw me, but not in a good way. "Hey," I said, holding up the box. "Just bringing these back." "Oh, Eli." Mom's voice floated from the porch. "We didn't think you'd come by today." She said it like I was some distant cousin, not her son. "I figured I'd get these out of your way," I replied, setting the box down. Julia gave a tight smile. "You didn't have to rush. We could have grabbed them next time." I almost said something small but sharp. Instead, I just nodded. Mark clapped me on the shoulder as I stood up. "You missed it," he said, grinning. "Dad's talking about remodeling the garage. We're turning part of it into a little workshop/bar. Kind of a hangout space, you know?" "That's great," I said. "Need any help with the setup?" He laughed. "Nah, I've got it covered." The way he said it, it wasn't dismissive in a playful way. It was a statement. Like my help wasn't even on the table. Dad cleared his throat, awkwardly. Your brother's got a good plan going. I told him he could use the old tool chest. Figured it'd get more use with him than sitting around. The tool chest. The one Dad and I had restored together over 2 summers when I was in high school. I remembered every nick, every replaced hinge, every evening we'd spent polishing the handles until they gleamed. But I smiled anyway. That's great, Dad. I'm glad it's staying in the family. Julia looked between us, sensing something. Oh, and we're going to paint a mural on the wall, she said. Mark's girlfriend is designing it. It's going to say something like home base or family first. Nice, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's fitting. I didn't stay long after that. When I got back in my car, I sat there for a minute, staring at the house. Through the window, I could see them laughing again. My laugh never echoed through that place. Not really. I was always the quiet one in the corner, the helper in the background. The one who left before dessert, so they could enjoy their evening uninterrupted. That's when I realized something I probably should have seen years ago. Being part of my family didn't mean belonging. It meant being useful. And once you stopped being useful, you disappeared. The next few days, I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time I opened my email, I saw Julia's name pop up in the group chain she'd started for Dad's memory book project. She wanted everyone to submit photos, letters, and memories. So out of habit, I did. I sent her 3 restored photos of Dad teaching me how to use a lathe, one of him holding me as a kid in the garage, and a short write-up about how he'd taught me patience through building. She never replied. 2 days later, she posted a digital preview of the book for everyone to see. My section wasn't there. Not one photo, not one word. When I messaged her privately, she responded hours later. Oh, sorry, Eli. I think your email went to spam or something. I already printed it, though, sad face. Maybe next time. Next time. Like there was going to be another chance to celebrate Dad's career of nearly 4 decades. I didn't reply. I didn't even get angry. I just sat there, staring at her message, realizing how effortlessly she'd erased me, again. By the weekend, the rest of the family started acting weirdly distant. Not cold, exactly, just politely indifferent. Like I'd been quietly downgraded from family to guest. Then came Sunday dinner. The breaking point. Mom had texted me that morning. We're having a small dinner tonight. Just us and a few close friends. Nothing fancy. I almost declined. But a small part of me still wanted to believe there was something left to salvage. When I walked in, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the air. Laughter spilled from the dining room. But as soon as I stepped through the doorway, everything went a little too quiet. At the table sat Mom, Dad, Julia, and Mark, plus 2 of Dad's old work friends. There were 6 place settings. Only 5 had plates. I stood there for a second, unsure. Oh, Eli, Mom said brightly, glancing at the empty space. We weren't sure if you were coming, so we didn't set another plate. There's some food in the kitchen, though. Some food in the kitchen. I told her it was fine and took a seat anyway. Julia made some comment about unexpected guests, and everyone chuckled. I smiled like it didn't sting. The conversation flowed around me, full of inside jokes and memories I wasn't part of. Dad's coworker leaned toward Mark and said, "You must be proud. Looks like you're following right in your father's footsteps." Mark grinned. "Trying to, yeah? Someone's got to keep the legacy going." Mom smiled at that. "He really is the responsible one," she said. "Always taking charge." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not all at once, but like glass under slow pressure. I thought about every time I'd covered for them, helped them, defended them. Every moment I'd been invisible. So I sat there quietly while they toasted, while they laughed about family leadership and carrying the torch. Then I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there staring into the mirror for a long time. It wasn't anger that I saw in my face. It was clarity. When I came back out, the table was half cleared. No one had noticed I'd been gone for nearly 10 minutes. That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop again. The letter I'd been drafting sat unfinished on the screen. It had started as something polite, a reflection, a request to be treated with basic respect. But as I stared at it, I realized words wouldn't be enough. If they couldn't see what they'd done in plain language, I'd have to show them. That's when the idea of the attachment came to me. It wasn't something malicious. I didn't want revenge for the sake of pain. I just wanted them to confront the truth they'd spent years ignoring. So I started working on it. I pulled up old photos, emails, screenshots, memories. Every small moment that told the real story of who I was in that family, the things they'd forgotten or pretended not to notice. And as I compiled everything, I noticed a pattern forming. One that even I hadn't fully recognized until I laid it all out side by side. The pattern wasn't just favoritism, it was deliberate erasure. Photos where I'd been cropped out for better framing. Texts where my contributions were acknowledged only through others. Projects I'd built or paid for being credited to someone else. And then, tucked in an old group email, I found the final straw. A forwarded message from Julia to Mom and Mark from months ago. The subject line read, "About Eli." In it, she'd written, "I know he means well, but honestly, I think keeping him at a distance is better for everyone. He's always so sensitive, and it just complicates things. We need peace, not drama. Let's keep events simple." Mom had replied, "Agreed. You know how he is. Best to keep things light." Mark's response was just 2 words, "Less hassle." I sat there for a long time staring at those 3 emails, hands trembling, not from shock, but from the realization that they hadn't just ignored me by accident. They'd chosen to. That was the night I finished the attachment. And the next morning, I printed the letter. It wasn't angry or dramatic. It was calm, almost clinical. I thanked them for showing me where I stood, for teaching me what family truly meant, even if it wasn't what they intended. Then I attached the file, titled it Perspective, and sent it to the family group chat. Within 10 minutes, my phone started buzzing. One by one, the read receipts appeared. Then, silence. And that silence told me more than words ever could. But what came after, how they reacted, what they said, what it changed, was something I could never have predicted. That was when everything truly broke. When I hit send on that email, I thought there'd be shouting. Maybe a flurry of defensive texts or phone calls, or at least an attempt to smooth things over. Instead, I got silence. A thick, echoing kind of silence that stretched through the house like fog. At first, I thought maybe they hadn't read it. But I saw the read receipts. Julia, read. Mark, read. Mom, read. Dad, read. And then nothing. No responses. No apologies. No questions. Just nothing. For 2 days, I kept my phone near me, checking every few minutes, waiting for something, anything. By the 3rd day, I stopped checking. By the 5th, I realized the silence was their answer. The attachment I'd sent wasn't vindictive. It was a simple, quiet presentation of truth. Photos, emails, group messages, all annotated with dates and short notes showing how often I'd been left out or replaced. It ended with one sentence. "I don't want anything from you. I just want you to see me." Apparently, even that was too much. When I went to visit my parents' house the next weekend, Dad didn't open the door. It was Mom who came out, arms crossed, her voice tight but calm. "Eli," she said, "maybe it's best if you take some space for a while. Everyone's upset." Upset. I repeated, "Because I told the truth?" She sighed, as if I were a child asking a question she didn't have time for. "You made everyone uncomfortable. You made your sister cry. That wasn't fair." "I made her cry?" Her expression hardened. "She's always tried to include you, Eli. You just never appreciate what people do for you. Sometimes you expect too much." That sentence landed like a stone in my chest. "I expect too much," I said slowly. "You mean like expecting to be acknowledged? To be treated like part of the family?" "Don't twist my words," she said sharply. "I'm just saying, you could have handled it privately." "I did," I said. "For years." She didn't reply. She just sighed again, the way she always did when a conversation didn't fit her version of events. "Finally," she said, "maybe it's best if you don't come around for a bit. Give everyone time to cool off." So I left. That was the last time I saw my family in person for over 6 months. The first few weeks after that were brutal. I'd been cut off before, not officially, but subtly, through avoidance and half-hearted excuses. But this time, it was total. No calls on my birthday. No texts from Dad about fixing his computer. Even the family group chat went silent, like I'd been erased from history. And for a while, I started to believe maybe I was the problem. I replayed every interaction, every family gathering, every moment where I might have said something wrong. Maybe I was too quiet, too sensitive. Maybe I should have just laughed it off, like always. But guilt is a strange thing. It eats at you, but it also leaves space behind it, empty space. And if you sit with that emptiness long enough, something new starts to grow there. At first, it was just a small flicker of peace. My apartment was quiet, but it was my quiet. No one criticizing how I spent my time. No guilt over not attending every gathering. No subtle reminders that I was less important. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was auditioning for a role in my own family. I started to fill my time differently. I took long walks after work. I started fixing things, not for anyone else, but for me. I built a shelf I didn't need. Refinished an old chair I found on the curb. It felt good, using my hands for something that wasn't about earning someone's approval. And somewhere in that stillness, I rediscovered the one thing I'd forgotten about myself. I was good at what I did. I'd always been the family's behind-the-scenes problem solver, but I'd never really seen that as a skill. It was just expected. But now, with no one else around, I started channeling that energy somewhere new. I began freelancing, repair work, small custom builds, home projects. It started small, through neighbors and word of mouth. I didn't even charge much at first, but people noticed the quality. They'd say things like, "You've got a real gift for this," or, "You're so patient, you must love what you do." And I did. For the first time, helping people didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a choice. One day, a client asked if I could design something unique, a custom desk for her home office. I spent a week sketching ideas, measuring angles, experimenting with finishes. When I delivered it, she was speechless. She posted about it online, tagging my little side business page that I'd half-heartedly created a month earlier. Within a week, I had 6 new commissions. By the end of 3 months, that side business had become something real. I called it Second Frame, partly because of the woodworking theme, but mostly because I felt like I was finally building a second life, one that fit. Still, there were moments when the loneliness hit hard. Birthdays, holidays, quiet Sunday mornings when I'd instinctively reach for my phone and remember no one was going to text. Then, one night in early spring, I got a message from Dad. It wasn't long, just, "Hope you're doing okay. Your mom's still upset. Julia's pregnant." I stared at the screen for a long time. I typed "congrats" and deleted it. Typed "tell her I said congrats" and deleted that too. Finally, I just locked my phone and sat there in silence. Part of me wanted to show up again, to prove I wasn't holding grudges. But the other part, the quieter part, knew that nothing had changed. They still saw me as the problem, not the product of years of being ignored. So I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself into work. I spent my evenings sanding wood until my hands hurt, my nights sketching designs that no one would ever criticize. It became therapy, in a way, me versus the grain, me shaping something broken into something new. The more I built, the lighter I felt. A few months later, I got invited to showcase my work at a local crafts fair. I didn't think anyone would care much, but to my surprise, people stopped, admired, asked questions. A local blogger even featured my booth, writing, "There's something deeply human about Eli's craftsmanship. His work carries a quiet strength." That line stuck with me. Quiet strength. It was everything I'd spent years trying to hide, because my family saw quiet as weakness. But now, strangers were seeing it as art. Slowly, my days began filling up again. Orders, projects, people who appreciated what I did. My world wasn't big, but it was real. It was mine. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, it was Julia. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Hey, Eli, it's me." I didn't say anything. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," she continued, "but I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I stayed silent. She rushed on. "Mom and Dad don't understand what you did, but I do now. I really do. I read that file again, and it broke me, honestly. You were right. We treated you like you didn't exist." Her voice cracked. "I just had the baby last week. Her name's Ella. And when I was holding her, all I could think was how much I want her to feel seen. I don't want her to ever feel the way you did." Something tightened in my chest. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now. And I'm sorry." For a long moment, all I could hear was her breathing through the phone. Then I said quietly, "Thank you." That was all. We talked for another few minutes. Awkward, tentative, but real. She sent me a photo of the baby afterward. For the first time in months, I smiled. After that call, something in me shifted again. I realized I didn't need my family's approval to be whole. But hearing Julia take responsibility, even just a little, felt like closing a wound I'd been carrying for years. I didn't rush back to them. I didn't beg for reconciliation. Instead, I kept living, working, building. A few months later, one of my designs was featured in a regional magazine. Then a larger publication reached out for an interview. They called my story, "The Maker Who Found Peace in the Silence." It was strange seeing my name in print. For once, it wasn't in the background. I didn't send the article to my family, but I knew, deep down, they'd see it eventually. Word travels. And when they did, I didn't need their praise or their validation. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to see me. I already saw myself. Still, life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. Months later, I got another message, this time from Mark. Just 5 words. "We need to talk. It's urgent." At first, I considered ignoring it. But something in his tone, short, serious, uncharacteristically humble, made me pause. Whatever it wasn't about pride anymore. It was something deeper. And I had no idea that the conversation we were about to have would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire family. When Mark's message came through, "We need to talk. It's urgent," I stared at it for nearly an hour before responding. I wasn't sure whether to feel curious, wary, or just tired. The last time my brother had said something was urgent. It involved me bailing him out of a mess he'd created, taking the blame for something that wasn't mine. But the tone of this message felt different. Short, uneasy, not his usual cocky, "I've got this" energy. I finally wrote back, "What's going on?" He replied immediately, "Can we meet? Just you and me. Please." The please caught my attention. Mark didn't do please. So, out of curiosity and caution, I agreed. We decided to meet at a small cafe near the edge of town, neutral ground. It was raining, a slow, steady drizzle that blurred everything outside. I got there early, sat in the corner booth, and watched the door. Mark arrived, shaking rain from his jacket, eyes scanning until they found me. He looked different, less sure of himself. His hair longer, his usual confidence replaced by a tension I hadn't seen in years. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." We sat in silence for a few moments. Finally, he said, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now." "You're not wrong," I said. "So what's this about?" "It's about Dad," he said. My stomach tightened. "What about him?" "He's not doing great. Health-wise." I didn't respond. "He's been having dizzy spells, chest pains. The doctor says it's stress, but I think it's more than that. And I think what happened with you, your letter, the file, it triggered a lot. Mom's distant, Julia barely speaks, and Dad, he's quiet. Really quiet." I leaned back. Part of me wanted to feel guilty, but another part whispered, "You didn't cause this. You just exposed it." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know we treated you like crap. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But Dad's still our dad. And if something happens, I don't want him to go to his grave thinking we're broken like this." "Broken?" I repeated softly. "Mark, we've been broken for years. You just didn't notice until it got uncomfortable." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I didn't. But I'm noticing now." He told me about the upcoming small dinner Mom was throwing for Dad's official retirement. "She said she's not inviting you, but I think you should come," he added. I laughed, short and humorless. "You think I should show up uninvited to a dinner I was explicitly excluded from?" "Yeah, when you put it like that, it sounds insane," he admitted. "But think about it. This is your chance to show them who you've become. Not to gloat. Just to show them you're not the same person they used to dismiss." I studied him. Something earnest in his face. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I think Dad regrets it. He looks at your old projects sometimes, like he's trying to find a way to undo the past." Something twisted inside me. "Then why hasn't he called?" "Pride," Mark said simply. "All of us too proud, too stubborn, too scared." That word, scared, hung in the air. For the next few days, I couldn't shake it. Walking back into that house felt impossible, but staying silent forever felt worse. Then, a thought struck me. If I went back, I wouldn't go as the forgotten son. I'd go as the man who built a life they couldn't dismiss. So I started preparing. Not dramatically, methodically, like any good craftsman. I reached out to Claire, a journalist friend who'd interviewed me months earlier. She had told me, "If you ever do a public show, I'd love to cover it." I told her I was planning something. I rented a small warehouse downtown. Dusty, high ceilings, open beams, perfect for a studio and, eventually, a showcase. I poured myself into building not just furniture, but an environment that reflected my story, my skill, my patience, and my rise from invisibility. I invited other local artists to display work alongside mine. It became a collaborative event, the second frame showcase. When the press release went out, Claire made sure it reached my family too. Julia texted first. "Wow, Eli, I just saw the article about your showcase. That's amazing." Then came another message. Mom sent it to the family chat. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone, including the ones who had ignored me for months. I didn't reply immediately. Later, I sent a short message to the family group chat. "You're all welcome to come to the showcase next Friday. Doors open at 6. No signature. No explanation. For 2 days, nothing." Then, late Wednesday night, Dad replied, "Proud of you, son. We'll be there." I stared at it. I didn't delete it. The next 48 hours felt like standing on a precipice. I didn't know what to expect: confrontation, awkward small talk, or hostility. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already lived through invisibility. There wasn't much left to lose. On the night of the showcase, the studio buzzed with excitement. Guests wandered through the space, asking questions, taking photos, and marveling at the craftsmanship. I moved among them, explaining the meaning behind each piece. Every conversation reminded me that my worth had been built by my own hands and effort, not by their acknowledgement. Then I saw them, my family, clustered near the back wall, staring at the tool chest engraved with legacy. Dad's hand rested on it, tracing the curves. Julia's face was pale, Mark's arrogance gone, replaced by awkward unease. Mom's composure had cracked. Her eyes darted around the room. I walked to the small stage, tapping the microphone. The crowd quieted, sensing something different. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice calm and deliberate. "This isn't just a showcase of furniture. Each piece represents years of learning, patience, and persistence. But the most important lessons didn't come from books or mentors. They came from people who underestimated me, ignored me, or assumed I would never stand up for myself." I clicked the remote. Images flashed on the wall, old photographs, emails, texts, proof of every contribution they'd ignored, every moment I'd been erased. My family froze. Dad's jaw tightened. Julia's eyes widened. Mark's face flushed. Mom's hands clenched and unclenched. "This," I said, pointing at the images, "is what being invisible looks like. And this," I added, opening the next file, "is what it looks like when someone refuses to stay quiet." I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just presented the truth, calm and undeniable. Then I played a short video, snippets of me working in the studio, designing, assembling, teaching others, laughing quietly while building my own life. The final frame read, "This is the person we chose to ignore, and this is the life he built anyway." The audience was captivated. My family, silent, staring, confronted with a reflection they couldn't spin or dismiss. Weeks later, the fallout was subtle but irrevocable. Julia asked about my projects. Mark acknowledged my work in conversation. Mom and Dad visited my studio quietly, no grand gestures, just recognition. I didn't need it, but it was theirs to give now. The true revenge wasn't punishment. It was revelation. Calm, deliberate, undeniable. They had to see the truth, and I had built it so they couldn't ignore it. I ran my fingers over the tool chest one last time and whispered to myself. I didn't need anyone to see me, but now they finally do. And for the first time, I believed it. The quiet revenge was complete. The night of the showcase felt electric, charged with a quiet anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. Guests wandered through the studio, murmuring about the craftsmanship, snapping pictures of the pieces, and asking me questions about design choices. I moved among them, guiding a few through the process, explaining the stories behind the wood grains, the angles, the reclaimed metal. Every interaction reinforced the truth I'd been building toward for months. I didn't need validation from my family to know my worth. I already had it, and now the world did too. Then I saw them. Mom, Dad, Julia, and Mark had stationed themselves near the back wall, by the tool chest labeled Legacy. Dad's hand lingered over the polished wood, his fingers tracing every curve as if he were remembering all the moments he'd once shared with me and had taken for granted. Julia's face was pale, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. Mark's usual arrogance was gone, replaced by an awkward, defensive stance. Even Mom's composure had faltered, her eyes darting between guests and my work. I knew the moment had come. I walked to the small stage at the center of the room, tapping the microphone. The crowd hushed, sensing something different in the tone of my voice. Not celebratory, but deliberate. Calm. Calculated. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, letting my gaze sweep the room slowly. "This isn't just a showcase of furniture or design. Each piece here represents years of learning, labor, and patience. But some of the most important lessons didn't come from books or mentors. They came from people who underestimated me, ignored me, or assumed I would never stand up for myself." I let a pause stretch. The silence was palpable. Even my family felt it. Julia's fingers tightened on her purse strap. Mark shifted awkwardly. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Dad's hands rested over the tool chest like he was bracing himself for impact. "I've spent a long time being overlooked," I continued, letting the words roll slowly, carefully. "Being expected to serve quietly, to help behind the scenes, to remain invisible while others took the spotlight. For a long time, I believed that was my role. That was my place in this family." I glanced at them, letting the words settle before delivering the part that would cement my message. Then I realized something. I said, voice steady, "Being invisible isn't just unfair, it's a choice others make for you. And the only way to reclaim your place is to take it for yourself." I clicked a small remote in my hand. Instantly, a projector lit up the wall behind me. Images began to flash, photographs from my childhood, photos of Dad and me building the tool chest, Julia smiling at the camera while I held a project I'd restored for her, Mark standing proudly next to a model I'd constructed for him, all annotated with short captions documenting every act, every contribution, every overlooked moment. The crowd murmured, eyes wide. My family froze. Dad's hand dropped from the chest, his jaw tightening. Julia's eyes widened, and Mark's face flushed a shade too dark. Mom's fingers clenched and unclenched, the calm facade cracking. "This," I said, pointing at the images, "is what being invisible looks like. And this," I added, opening the next file, "is what it looks like when someone finally refuses to stay quiet." The images shifted to emails, texts, and scanned letters. All factual, all indisputable. My contributions credited only to others, projects erased from memory, moments minimized or dismissed. The audience was silent, the weight of my family's actions now undeniable. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just presented the truth. Calm, clear, and impossible to refute. Julia whispered, "Eli," but it sounded small, weak. Mark shook his head, muttering, "I didn't know." Dad's voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. I didn't realize." Mom swallowed hard, finally breaking her silence. "Eli, I raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "No, don't. Not yet. Listen first." I let the silence stretch for another few seconds before speaking again. "I don't need your apologies. I don't need to be told I'm right. I just need this to be seen. Everyone here, guests, neighbors, clients, they've seen it. And now, so have you." There was no dramatic confrontation, no yelling. Just the stillness, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, my family was confronted with a reflection they couldn't ignore, couldn't spin, couldn't dismiss. Then came the final part of the plan. I clicked the remote again. A short video played on the wall. Footage I'd recorded over the past few months. Me in the workshop, sanding a table, polishing the tool chest, assembling a chair. There were snippets of me designing, laughing quietly while working, talking to Claire about the showcase, coordinating volunteers, signing off on press articles. It was a documentary of my life over the last year, my resilience, my talent, my transformation from the invisible son to someone who had built a life, a career, and a presence that could not be denied. The audience was mesmerized. Some guests wiped tears from their eyes. My family didn't move. They watched in stunned silence as the video ended with the words, "This is the person we chose to ignore. And this is the life he built anyway." I stepped down from the stage, walking slowly toward the tool chest. Dad's eyes met mine. There was no need for words. He understood the magnitude of what I'd created, what I'd done without their approval, without their support, and despite their dismissals. Julia's voice cracked. "Eli, I never realized." Mark looked at the floor, muttering, "I can't believe we." Mom's hands shook as she covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. I smiled faintly, a quiet, victorious smile. Not cruel, not gloating. Just steady. The calm satisfaction of someone who had taken control of a narrative that had long been stolen from him. The night ended with congratulations from guests, questions about commissions, and invitations to collaborate. My family lingered near the entrance, watching as others celebrated me openly, their presence awkward and small in comparison. They couldn't interrupt. They couldn't claim credit. They were forced to witness the reality of what I had accomplished on my own. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about revelation. Showing people the truth in such a way that they cannot pretend it doesn't exist. Watching them confront their own choices silently can be far more powerful than any argument, any confrontation, any dramatic spectacle. Weeks passed. The fallout was subtle but undeniable. My family didn't reach out immediately, but the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Julia started asking questions about my projects, genuinely curious, cautiously respectful. Mark stopped making jokes about leadership and started acknowledging my contributions in conversation. Mom and Dad visited my studio quietly, no fanfare, no grand gestures, just presence, a tentative recognition of who I had become. I didn't demand their approval. I didn't need it. But it was theirs to offer now, and they did so in small increments, measured, cautious, genuine. The most satisfying part wasn't that they had to admit I'd been right all along. It wasn't that I finally had a family who saw me, or that I had proven something to them. The most satisfying part was that I had proven it to myself first. I had turned years of neglect and dismissal into opportunity. I had built not just a workshop, a showcase, or a business, but a life that no one could diminish. I had taken what they tried to erase and turned it into evidence of my own worth. And I had done it quietly, deliberately, with patience and precision. That night, when the last guest had left, I stood in the studio alone, the smell of sawdust and polish lingering in the air. I ran my fingers along the tool chest one last time, smiling at the engraved word, legacy. And I whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to myself. I didn't need anyone to see me. But now they finally do. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The quiet revenge was complete. The scales balanced, not through anger, but through the power of truth and the work of my own hands. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying victory of all. I walked to the door, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the night. The rain had stopped. The city lights reflected off wet streets, shimmering like they knew the weight of what had just been accomplished. And I felt lighter, stronger, unstoppable. No words could undo what I'd built. No apology, no explanation, no act of contrition could ever erase it. Because this time, I had built it all for me. And that was enough.